The foreman's whistle hadn't even finished echoing across the lot when Andre Keller stepped forward, looked Nina Callahan dead in the eye and said, "This is my site, and you're done." The entire crew froze, mid-motion, the only sound the slow drop of a wrench hitting gravel. No one breathed as he revealed the truth. The quiet man in dusty boots was actually the new CEO, and he'd been watching everything. Hi, everyone. Today we're stepping onto a construction site in the blistering New Mexico heat, a place where rules are firm, voices are louder, and respect is often mistaken for fear. But what happens when someone walks in quietly and turns the entire system on its head without ever raising their voice? You're about to find out. Because this isn't a story about position, it's about presence. And how power, real power, doesn't always come with a clipboard or a company badge. This could happen to anyone, even you. So before we dive into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, where are you watching from? And what time is it right now? I love seeing our community come together. Let's get into it. It was already pushing 89 degrees by 9 or sure a.m. in Las Cruces, New Mexico, and the steel framework of the commercial site shimmered like a mirage. The scent of sawdust mixed with desert air and the clanging of tools echoed against scaffolds that stretched like ribs into the morning sky. Nina Callahan stepped out of her trailer, squinting behind mirrored sunglasses. 42, sharp-jawed and clad in a neon vest over a tank top that showed off her sunburned shoulders, she ran the site like a drill sergeant. Crews moved when she barked. Mistakes were not repeated. If something didn't meet spec, she didn't ask questions, she demanded corrections. People said she was one of the most efficient managers in the company. They also said they were glad not to be in her direct line of sight. She tugged her hard hat tighter and scanned the rows of workers. Welders sparked along a steel spine. A group of plumbers uncoiled tubing by the pump trench. Then her eyes paused. One man stood alone near the east perimeter, nowhere near any assigned task. He was tall, black, probably late 40s, and wore a gray hoodie streaked with dust jeans that had seen better days and old work boots caked in site debris. He wasn't wearing a badge. No clipboard, no vest, no radio. Just standing there, hands in his pockets like he belonged. Nina's jaw set. She didn't believe in hesitation, especially not when it came to safety or site protocol. She marched across the gravel, weaving around wheelbarrows and rebar until she stood squarely in front of him. "Hey," she said, "Kurt, you lost." The man turned slowly, his expression unreadable. "No, ma'am." "Then what exactly are you doing wandering my site like a tourist I'm observing?" "Observing," she narrowed her eyes. "This isn't a field trip. You got a reason to be here or not." He nodded slightly. "Looking at process flow communication, safety habits." That last part nearly made her laugh. "You see a hard hat on your head, a clearance badge. Know then you're about 30 seconds from being escorted off the property. I'm not in anyone's way. That's not the point." She planted her feet. "This is an active zone. You're not authorized. Who let you in?" He shrugged, walked in with the morning crew. Her face flushed, half from the heat, half from the audacity. "Name Andre. Andre Keller. Didn't ring a bell. Not on the schedule. Not on her roster. Not even as a delivery subcontractor." She exhaled sharply. "Andre Keller, you've got exactly 1 minute to turn around and head for the gate before I call security." He didn't move. Instead, he looked past her toward a pair of workers adjusting welding equipment on the north scaffolding. "Your guy's using an H31 torch," he said quietly. "What that model won't hold under ambient temperature variances for steel that size should be using a 432 head." Nina blinked. How would you even know that he reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded site schematic, annotated and dog-eared? Her initials were in the bottom corner. Her voice went tight. "Where did you get this same place you did?" he said calmly. A few workers nearby had gone quiet, pretending to be focused but unmistakably listening. She could feel it, eyes darting, heads turning just slightly. Nina snatched the blueprint, scanned it, and shoved it back at him. "You've made your point," she snapped. "Now get out before I have someone walk you out." Andre didn't flinch. "I'll step aside," he said, "but you might want to check your lift crew. The trench they're grading is about 6 degrees off center. She clenched her fists. You just love telling people how to do their job, don't you? I like seeing things done right. Without another word, he turned and walked toward the scaffolding, leaving her standing there like someone who just got corrected in her own classroom. Back at her trailer, she immediately radioed the gate. No log under Andre Keller, no delivery signed in, no visitor badge issued. She stared at her screen jaw working. Who the hell was he? By mid-morning, the sun had turned from punishing to aggressive, the kind of heat that made plastic tool grips slick with sweat. Nina tried to shake it off, moving briskly through the work zones, barking out status updates, demanding alignment, fixes, red penning measurement logs. But every so often she caught a glimpse of that hoodie, always just a few feet away from something important, watching a trench, eyeballing a joint, inspecting pump placement like it was second nature. And worse, no one was stopping him. Some even looked like they were listening. By noon, the Las Cruces heat was unbearable. Steel beams radiated warmth like stovetops, and the air shimmered above the asphalt in lazy waves. Nina Callahan's nerves were frayed thin, not because of the sun or the noise, but because that man, Andre Keller, still hadn't left the site. And what was worse, no one seemed to be questioning it anymore. She caught him again near the West Trench. He was crouched next to a couple of first-year apprentices, pointing out something on the layout schematic with the calm of someone who'd spent years in the field. One of the younger guys, she thought his name was Ryan, nodded along, responding like Andre was a trusted supervisor. Nina snapped. She crossed the distance in 20 strides and didn't bother with niceties. Ryan, why are you standing around? You on break, no ma'am. Ryan mumbled, straightening up. Just asking a question. Ask your supervisor, not some random guy who walked in off the street. Andre stood up slowly, brushing dust from his jeans. He asked about flow angles in the trench, he said simply. I didn't tell him anything that isn't in your own plans. Nina's voice dropped into a dangerous hush. You think I don't know what this is? You walk around pretending to be helpful, making me look like I don't know what I'm doing, Andre interrupted softly. That's not what I'm doing. Oh no, she took a step closer. Then why are you always right where something's being done wrong? Why are you always watching, always listening? He didn't answer, just looked at her with that same unreadable calm. It got under her skin more than yelling ever could. Come with me, she ordered, spinning on her heel. He followed without a word. She led him into the central loading area, wide open, filled with forklifts, pallets, rotating crew members, and raised her voice just enough to cut across the noise. Everyone, she called. This is Andre Keller. He's been walking around all day, giving out advice like he's got a business card that matters. A few heads turned. A couple of men paused mid-stride. He's not cleared. He's not assigned. He's just a guy in dirty boots who thinks reading a few blueprint notes makes him qualified to tell a whole crew how to do their jobs. Andre didn't move, didn't defend himself, didn't even blink. Let me be clear, Nina said, letting the moment hang. We don't take orders from strangers, and we don't take advice from people who don't carry the weight of accountability. Someone in the back muttered, could have fooled me. A few quiet chuckles quickly suppressed. Nina's face twitched. We need doers, not critics. Andre finally spoke. I didn't come here to critique. I came to see what happens when nobody's watching. That silenced everything. It wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive. But it landed like a lead beam. After a beat, he turned and walked away, leaving her in the middle of the crew with the weight of her own voice hanging in the heat. Back in her trailer, she slammed the door harder than she meant to and grabbed her radio. Ellis, she barked to the foreman. What do you know about this Keller guy? There was a pause. I don't know much, Ellis said. He walked in early this morning. Thought maybe he was corporate. Well, he's not. And if he's still on this site an hour from now without a damn title next to his name, it's on you. Copy that, Ellis replied. But he didn't sound confident. She leaned over her desk, forehead nearly touching the dusty blueprints spread across it. This wasn't how her days went. She was used to being in charge. Clean systems, quick answers, total control. But that man, he was undoing everything without raising his voice. And somehow that was worse. Later, while checking camera feeds for Lot C, she spotted him again. Andre was sitting alone on a stack of concrete slabs, eating a peanut butter sandwich out of a crinkled foil wrapper. not looking at his phone, not writing notes, just watching, at peace. That disturbed her more than she cared to admit. A few minutes later, one of the younger apprentices, Luis, maybe walked over and offered him a cold Gatorade and a bag of chips. Andre declined, smiled faintly, and returned to watching. They sat together for a while, quietly talking. The body language was casual, friendly, too friendly. Nina clicked off the feed. "Ellis," she said into the radio again. "Yeah, what's the crew saying about him?" There was a longer pause this time. "They're saying he might be corporate. Nobody wants to ask. Based on what he notices things most people miss, stuff only auditors or engineers care about. But he's not taking notes, just remembering." Her grip tightened on the mic. "I've got no word from HQ," she said through gritted teeth. "No memos, no alerts, no nothing. Tell your guys to stop speculating and get back to work," Copy Ellis said quietly. But she could hear it in his voice. The speculation wasn't going to stop. By late afternoon, the atmosphere had changed. Subtle, but real. Conversations were quieter. Glances lingered longer. Some crew members looked her in the eye with something new behind their gaze. Not fear, not challenge, just awareness. Like they were waiting for something. Or someone. Nina walked the scaffolding path again and spotted Andre standing by the hoist zone, watching two workers maneuver a steel beam into position. He wasn't interfering, but his presence felt heavier than ever. It was no longer just about him being out of place. It was about them wondering if she was. At exactly 2:58 p.m., the sharp, unmistakable sound of three short whistle blasts ripped through the site, high, clear, and commanding. Not the usual end-of-shift signal. This one meant mandatory gathering. No exceptions, no questions. Nina Callahan, still seated in her trailer in mid-email to her regional director, froze. She hadn't authorized any meeting. She stood quickly, grabbed her hard hat, and stepped out into the heat, the sun now casting long, sharp shadows across the site. Crews began converging near the open lot beside the generator bay, gloved hands wiping sweat from necks, high-vis vests, glowing like fireflies against the metal frame skeleton of the unfinished building. The sense of order, of hierarchy, was thinning. As she approached, Nina saw the foreman, Ellis, standing off to the side next to a folding table, unusual already. But what stopped her short was what lay on top: a single clipboard, a half-full water bottle, and a folded gray hoodie. That hoodie. Her eyes locked on it. Then from behind the crowd, Andre Keller stepped forward. Not rushed, not hesitant, just steady, like he was walking into his own living room. He reached the table, picked up the clipboard, flipped a page, and looked out over the crew, 50, maybe 60 workers, every one of them silent now. Then he spoke. "My name is Andre Keller. I'm the new CEO of Keller Salazar Industries, and this is my site." The silence that followed was physical. It wrapped around the lot like a steel cable pulled tight. A few heads turned sharply to look at Nina. Others simply blinked, stunned. She didn't move, didn't blink. Andre continued, voice low, but perfectly clear. "I've been with the company just under a month, and I wanted to understand the culture on the ground, how things work when titles aren't announcing themselves. Not on paper, not in a conference room, but out here, where the work really happens." He scanned the crowd slowly. "I saw a lot. Smart workers, teamwork, precision, people stepping in to help without being asked." Then he paused and turned his body ever so slightly in Nina's direction. "But I also saw something else. I saw fear being used as a stand-in for respect. I saw leaders who managed through volume instead of value. I saw people being spoken to like they were less because they didn't wear the right badge or speak in the same tone." Nina's mouth was dry. Her fists were clenched so tight her nails bit into her palm. Andre's voice didn't rise. If anything, it softened. "I was interrupted, dismissed, publicly scolded. That's fine, I can take it. But what concerned me more is that it wasn't unusual. It was routine. It wasn't just aimed at me." I watched others flinch before they spoke. I watched hesitation where there should have been confidence. A few in the crowd nodded. Nina's breathing quickened, but she couldn't seem to pull in enough air. She felt her authority, the structure she had built around herself, slipping through invisible cracks. Andre looked directly at her now. Miss Callahan, he said her name clean and final. You are experienced, you are efficient, but you've chosen intimidation over inspiration, orders over communication, control over collaboration. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Andre delivered the line like he was filing a report. Effective immediately, your employment with Keller Salazar Industries is terminated. No pause, no apology, just the line. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Someone near the back whispered, "Oh my God!" A welder dropped his glove. One woman covered her mouth with both hands. Nina felt the sun on her face, but her skin was cold. "You didn't even tell me who you were," she choked out. "I didn't need to," Andre said calmly. "Respect isn't supposed to be conditional." That silenced her completely. He stepped back, set the clipboard down, and gave a short nod. Meeting adjourned. Everyone hydrate, take 10, and then let's finish strong. No yelling, no posturing, just closure. Workers hesitated at first, unsure if they were actually dismissed. Then one by one, they began to scatter, some quietly, some whispering in small clusters, all giving Nina a wide berth. No one looked at her with anger. They didn't have to. They just looked past her. That was worse. Ellis never approached. He lingered near the trailer path but said nothing. She caught his eye for half a second. He looked away. She didn't walk back. Not right away. Just stood in the middle of the lot, her boots sunk half an inch into the gravel, staring at the empty space Andre had just stepped away from. Her hands were trembling. She hated that. Hated that anyone could see it. Eventually she turned. Each step back toward her trailer felt heavier. Inside, the air conditioning buzzed, but the space felt suffocating. She sat at her desk, stared at the computer screen, and tried to move. She thought about calling HR, maybe even legal. But what would she say? She reached for her phone, then stopped. There was no statement that could undo this. The crew would remember what happened long after the paperwork was filed, and worse, none of them looked surprised. She glanced at the clipboard with her name etched on the back, Callahan, in blocky black print. For years it had meant authority. Now it felt like a relic from a story no one would tell with sympathy. Out on the site, the hum resumed. Grinders whirred, radios crackled, voices shouted instructions across steel frames. Business as usual, but different. By the next morning, the story had already started to spread. No press releases, no dramatic headlines, just whispers, emails, text threads, contractor group chats. A picture showed up first, a low-res phone photo taken from someone's hip, capturing a dusty construction lot, a crowd of workers in orange and green vests, and then one man standing in front of them, his gray hoodie folded neatly on the table beside him. The caption read simply, "Respect isn't supposed to be conditional, Andre Keller." Within hours, it was reshared across LinkedIn feeds, Reddit threads, private message boards for project managers, and union circles from Sacramento to Tampa. Former employees began chiming in. A mechanical intern from last year posted anonymously, "She made me cry in front of the team for mixing up two pipe sizes. I had a sprained wrist and didn't tell anyone. She said I didn't belong in the field." A female electrical engineer added, "It's always about tone. If you're firm, you're abrasive. If you're kind, you're soft." Seeing someone like Andre step up, I finally feel like maybe this industry's changing. The firm said nothing. Not publicly, and that silence made the truth ring louder. Meanwhile, back in Las Cruces, the site operated with a strange quiet. Not awkward, not solemn, just different. Tools still clanged. Beams were lifted. Concrete was poured. But the way people moved changed. There were more conversations, real ones. There was laughter, quiet, cautious at first, then freer. And there was no trace of Nina Callahan. Her trailer was cleared out within 2 days. The clipboard with her name, gone. A new supervisor stepped in by Friday. His name was Mark Delgado, an Army vet with a gentle voice, a notebook always in hand, and a habit of asking, "What do you think?" before making a decision. The crew didn't clap. They didn't cheer. But they didn't flinch when he spoke. And that said everything. One afternoon, Ellis the foreman stood near the generator bay with a thermos in hand, just watching the site. He wasn't barking orders. He wasn't micromanaging. Just watching. A few of the older crew members approached him to ask questions. Short, careful ones. He answered with nods. Not commands understanding. Across the lot, two welders leaned against a shade tarp during break. One sipped an orange Gatorade. The other had his shirt untucked, face red from heat. You ever seen anything like that, one asked? The other shook his head. Not in front of everyone like that. Not in real time. Think he planned it, had to. Think she's gonna fight it. The second man stared off at the cranes above them. Maybe. But does it matter now? And they both knew the answer. It wasn't about whether she fought back. It was that no one wanted her back. Not even the ones who once feared her. And Andre, he was gone. No press tour, no email, no thanks for your time. He had simply walked off site, nodded at Ellis, and disappeared behind a wall of cargo containers like a man returning to wherever he'd come from. But the ripple he left behind didn't vanish. Jacob, one of the youngest apprentices, noticed it most. The way the older guys began including him in layout discussions. The way supervisors asked why instead of just saying, do it again. He moved faster now, straighter, like he belonged. A week later, Jacob was reassigned to a different project site in Deming, about an hour west. New crew, new setup. But the old habits of hierarchy were still there, until lunchtime. That's when Andre walked in. Same gray hoodie, same dusty boots, same clipboard tucked under one arm. Jacob nearly dropped his sandwich. You again, he called out, grinning. Andre looked up and gave a quiet smile. They still letting you talk back like that, only on Thursdays. They sat on a stack of lumber-splitting shade from a wall panel. Andre didn't say much, just observed, occasionally sipping water from a dented metal canteen. You know that clip of you went viral, Jacob said finally. Andre didn't look up. I heard. You gonna make a statement? No. Why not? Because it's not about me. Jacob nodded, then frowned. Then what was it about? Andre's reply was soft but sharp. It's about what people tolerate, and what they stop tolerating once someone finally says, that's enough. They sat there a while in silence. Later that week, Andre walked the edge of the site, pausing near trenches, glancing at rebar, watching how leads spoke to their teams. Not taking notes, just remembering. Jacob followed for a few steps, then asked, you really think people change after something like that? Andre didn't answer right away. Then he said some do if they want to. Back in Las Cruces, Nina's name stopped being mentioned. The crew didn't joke about her, didn't criticize her. They just moved on. Not out of cruelty, out of clarity. They didn't need to tear her down anymore. She had already done that herself. And Andre. He never came back to Las Cruces, but his name stuck around like a lesson scratched into steel. At another job site weeks later, two junior engineers debated over drainage specs. One finally sighed and said, you know what? Keller would ask. The other grinned. Yeah. Who's being overlooked in this process? And just like that, the culture was no longer enforced. It was lived. Fall crept in quietly, cooling the desert just enough to change how the air moved across the steel. It wasn't sharp anymore. It was soft sweeping. At the Glendale site just outside Phoenix, the crew had just broken ground. Survey markers dotted the dirt like flags at a miniature battlefield, and fresh dig lines etched the soil into grids of intention. That morning, just after 7:00 a.m., Andre Keller showed up. No announcement, no meeting, no orders. Just a man in dusty boots, a folded hoodie slung over one shoulder, and a calm walk that drew neither suspicion nor fanfare, just respect. Jacob, now a lead on the Glendale team, spotted him first and couldn't help but smile. His boots were newer now, cleaner, but when he saw Andre, he felt something settle in his chest, like a compass had found true north again. You ever take a day off? He called across the lot. Andre turned with a familiar glint in his eye. You still asking questions like that? Only when I know the answer. They walked together through the site, past surveyors calling out measurements, past piles of rebar and stacks of marked panels, past a group of new hires being coached by a supervisor who for once didn't have to raise his voice. You really gonna keep doing this? Jacob asked. Showing up like a ghost with a hard hat, Andre chuckled quietly. Ghosts don't ask about load tension and grade angles. Jacob shook his head. You didn't come here to audit. No, Andre said. I came here to remember what leadership is supposed to look like. They paused at the edge of the trench where two apprentices knelt, leveling the foundation lines with patient, deliberate movements. I wanted to see who we're building with, who's being silenced, who's being overlooked. Leadership doesn't start in boardrooms, Andre added, eyes steady. It starts right here with how we treat the people holding the shovels, not the ones holding the pens. Jacob looked at him quiet for a moment, then asked, "You ever think about what would have happened if Nina hadn't said what she said every day?" Andre said. "And she still would have been replaced, but no one would have learned a thing." That hit hard. A few yards away, one of the new guys struggled to align a pipe segment. Another stepped in, not to take over, but to show him, to guide his hands instead of barking at him. Jacob noticed. So did Andre. "That's the shift," Andre said. "You ever hear from her?" Jacob asked. Nina. Andre paused, then shook his head. "No, but that's not what matters." What does Andre's voice was quiet, like he was letting the wind carry it. The crew. They're the ones who carry the lesson forward, not the ones who disappear after they're done. They stood together a little longer, watching the foundation form, each measurement more than a number. It was a symbol of how things were changing. "You know what the hardest part of this job is?" Andre asked. Jacob shook his head. "Letting people fail publicly, even when they deserve it, because you know it's going to hurt, and you know everyone's going to remember it." Jacob looked down at his own boots, then at the younger team laying steel behind him. "So why do it?" he asked. Andre's answer was simple. Because if no one ever draws a line, nothing ever changes. Later that evening, after the site began to quiet and most of the crew had packed up, Jacob stood alone by the bed of his truck. The sky was soft peach, streaked with lavender, the last beams of sunlight tracing the edges of unfinished framework. He pulled out his phone and opened his notes app. He typed one line, "Character shows when you think no one's watching." He didn't post it, didn't tag anyone, didn't share it in a story or tweet it with a hashtag. He just saved it, because some lessons aren't for show, some are for keeping. Sometimes justice doesn't need sirens. It doesn't need headlines or gavel strikes or angry speeches. Sometimes justice looks like quiet correction, like a man in boots who asks questions instead of barking orders, like a crowd that goes still, not because they were told to, but because they finally see something worth listening to. This story wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about humiliation. It was about a culture that had gone unchecked for too long. A culture that wore power like armor and used fear as fuel. And when someone finally stood in the middle of it, not with fists clenched but hands open, that armor cracked. Andre Keller didn't lead with his title. He led with his presence, his clarity, his unwillingness to let things slide simply because they've always been that way. And that shook people, not because he shouted, but because he didn't need to. You see, real leadership doesn't need volume to be heard. It doesn't need authority to be respected. It needs courage. It needs stillness. It needs someone to say enough when enough is long overdue. And maybe you're not a CEO. Maybe you don't run a job site. But chances are you've seen your own version of Nina Callahan. And maybe, just maybe, you've been Andre, watching, waiting, hoping someone would say what needed to be said. Next time, maybe it's your turn. And when that time comes, speak softly but speak clearly, because someone's always watching. And change starts with one voice that decides silence isn't enough.